Thank you again for joining us today. This is Jay Dawkins. I'm co-founder and CEO here at PublicInput, and we're excited about the things we're going to share today. We've certainly been probably in the same boat as many of you, kind of working the long hours, trying to figure out the right response in a situation that's very different from how it was even just a week ago. So the good news is the sleepless nights and the tireless efforts on behalf of a lot of organizations and here with the product team are turning into some solutions that we're excited to share. A lot of this stuff is something new for all of us, so it's exciting to be able to partner with folks that are figuring this out with us. So today we're going to cover some of the things that we've learned and some of the things that we're creating for our partners to deploy into the world and use to address the needs that are emerging as part of this crisis. We'll go ahead and get started here. Again, if you've got questions or thoughts that you'd like to see us cover today, just drop them into the chat window, and Hunter, our marketing director, is there to field those, and he'll relay questions to us in a little bit here. But again, thank you for taking the time, and we're privileged to have you with us today. And we should go ahead and record the meeting, if someone point out. Yes, okay, so we are started with recording. And we'll share this out in the video format after the call to share with peers. So just to get started today, I think it helps to frame things around the key issues that we've heard from our partners and the clear things that face us as local government and state government folks. So one of the biggest things, and really the number one thing we're hearing right now, is that without meetings, what do we do? In this environment, we've still got a need to keep the wheels on track. We've got projects that if we don't keep the public input moving along, there are major opportunities that could be lost. So if we miss certain time windows for things like bond issuances, key projects, if we're talking about even transportation projects and the federal and state funding models around those, there's a lot of questions about how this will impact it. So a big focus of ours here is how can we help you all keep those on track and really deliver for the public through all of this. Ultimately, by focusing on a solution set that can keep some sense of normalcy going, it can keep meetings happening and give people at least equal opportunities to participate, if not improved opportunities to participate with their local governments. Ultimately, we're moving forward, and in the face of this adversity, we can emerge even better from an engagement standpoint. So that's one of the key issues we're addressing. And Madura, if you want to talk about some of the other things we've heard.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much, Jay. If you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide, just so we don't switch, that'd be perfect. The other issue that we're really hearing from a lot of our local government partners is that really it's just been, for their residents, it's been too much information and not enough of a sense of where do I get the right information from? What is the actual information that I need to know to keep myself, my family, my community safe? And how can I make sure that I am doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing? So part of the challenges here, I think all of you are probably experiencing this, include, if your residents are particularly exposed to national news media, or if they're exposed to news via social media, which can also be a challenge. They may be getting misinformation, they may be getting sensationalized headlines, they may just be getting plain wrong information. So that's a big consideration. The other thing that's happening is, I think, because there's so much uncertainty in terms of what's happening right now, what's going to be happening in the future, overall what this ultimately can lead to is further loss of public trust in our government institutions, and that's exactly the opposite of what we want here. So that's another issue that we're addressing in terms of helping you and your community members better understand what's the right information, how can you quickly get that information to your residents, and how can you reiterate that you are, again, the source of the best possible information you can possibly send out there. Jay, do you want to take over for the next slide?
Sure.
Thanks.
Well, I think the key goals today, so with those two things in mind, so how do we move forward with meetings, with public involvement in the face of this crisis? The first goal is figuring out a way to implement a virtual meeting solution. And the second aspect, which Madura just covered, is deploying messaging that combats misinformation. So if you're a communicator, a planner, or anyone that has to interface with the public or help elected officials or committees that meet, all of this should be valuable in terms of providing an actionable pathway forward during this situation. So the first thing that we want to cover there is around the misinformation and some tools to do messaging in this environment. Madura and her team have done some incredible work pulling together a number of resources that are now available just to deploy as part of an engagement playbook. And so I'll hand it off to you, Madura, to cover that.
Thanks so much. That's perfect. I think, Jay, if you could do me a favor and just stop sharing your screen, I might be able to take over presenter role here and then show folks what we've done. But that's perfect. Thank you. While we do that, though, I just want to say we're really lucky here at PublicInput to have just an absolutely stellar team. In addition to the team members that we have here, we also have been able to, excuse me, I'm not caught up on my screen here. We have phenomenal members like one of our consultants that works with us named Bronley, and we've been tapping into our community members' kind of knowledge base to create this playbook for you. So the playbook in general, what does it actually mean? What we've created is kind of a set of resources for you to hopefully be able to combat and more quickly respond to COVID-19 and communicate this information to your residents. This includes a few things. I'll show you the live site itself in just a few minutes, but in general, it includes a few templates that are resourced for you. So you have, you'll be able to actually plug and play your information that's relevant to your community directly in there. We also have a preparedness quiz that you can use to send to your community members in case some residents may benefit from that type of interaction to help them understand what they're supposed to do. And then we also have a public health pledge, which Jay will cover in a little bit more detail, but it's designed really, again, to give a sense of ownership to each and every one of your residents so that they understand, yes, there are a few things that I know I can do to help the community here during this time. And yes, I specifically really understand them. Throughout the set that I'll show you, what you'll notice is that we have items that are pulled directly from the CDC's website as well as the World Health Organization. And you're welcome to use those resources just like they're listed on their websites. You're welcome to keep them directly in the templates that we've created, or you're welcome to change them out to something more specific from your local organization's website as well. That's fine. And then, of course, we also have lots of frequently asked questions in there. So let's take a look at what this engagement playbook actually looks like. And at the end of this webinar, you'll be getting a link to this as well. So let's run through what we've actually created here for you. So if you're able to see my screen now, what you should be looking at is the actual playbook itself. This is really designed to be just kind of a starting point for you if you need a place to consolidate all of the information for COVID-19 for your community and its response. We have tips in here in terms of just how to use this playbook. We also have tips in here on what some best practices are when it just comes to good engagement for residents in general. We also have, examples from other local governments that are doing a really great job. So for example, what you're looking at here in terms of check the source, the Iowa Department of Public Health did a really good job with this. They basically are pushing this out on social media as a way to remind their residents, hey, if you're getting information and it's from a source like Facebook or maybe your best friend, that is not the same as getting it from the health department, who's going to be your best source of information. And you can deploy tactics really similar to this for your local organization as well. In addition to this information, we also have some tips below here on how to maximize reaching the number of residents that you have and re-engaging existing residents that may have been in contact with you in the past. Finally, when we get to the actual templates themselves, again, these are all available for our current clients for sure, and then you'll have this playbook sent to you after the webinar as well. But in terms of what the actual template looks like, I'll show you an example of what we've created here. This is what I was talking about when we talked about the plug and play template. So we've created this for you with the idea in mind that most local governments probably want to consolidate all of the information related to different stakeholder groups that are going to need information from them. Although this is clearly a really stressful and challenging time, one of the benefits of having something that's affecting everybody is that you can literally plug into every single one of your community groups or every single one of your stakeholders to be able to help spread the information and also to integrate as much of that information as possible. So what we've included here includes just some basic information about how your community may be responding, confirmed cases, staying healthy, for example, and just different information for stakeholder groups or relevant community groups that you may be working to inform. All of this, as I mentioned, you can change out if you want to and adapt to your own community's needs. But in addition to this, something that you can do that can be really helpful is including little things for your community, like what can they do in addition to just knowing what they're supposed to do to stay healthy. So how can they help their community? You can even do things like hosting live chats directly on the website itself. So if people want a place to either share their story about what's been hard, share tips on what's been useful or how they've been able to get through it with other members of their community, these are all really great ways to crowdsource the ingenuity of your residents and your community, and to share that out with other community groups as well. So all of this is available to you, again, as I mentioned. I won't spend too much longer going on this, but the idea is you're going to consolidate as many of your engagement channels as possible here, including your website, your online surveys, your emails, your newsletters, and you're going to keep cross-referencing this so that everyone knows exactly where to find information and where they can put out and where they can go to be of help if they're, feeling a little cooped up while they're in isolation at home. If I go back to the slide deck here, a couple of things to run through. If you are ready to launch templates, if you're a current client of ours, this information is already available to you. And so where you're going to find that information, I'm just going to use the city of Charlotte here as an example, is if you go to your dashboard, you're going to be able to find this information directly in the templates library. If you click it, for example, like I'm doing here, and you type in just COVID, you're going to be able to find all of the COVID-related information that we have, including the preparedness quiz, the health pledge, and the playbook itself. So to view the page, you just click on the eye icon here. And if you want to copy this directly into your organization's website or your dashboard, click it. That way you can have the entire thing live in your organization's dashboard, and then you'll be able to manipulate it to match exactly what you want to match for your own residents themselves. So that's for current residents, or excuse me, for current clients. And if I jump back into our library here, if you are not currently working with us, but you're interested in this information, of course, we'll be sending you the public-facing link that you're welcome to use as a resource at any point. But you're also welcome to just drop us a line here by clicking on sending us a form for virtual engagement toolkit for us to send that to you, excuse me. Hunter here is going to be sending the link for that in the chat bot for you all in just a few minutes. If he hasn't already, he may already have done that. And just click on that. You can fill out your information, and we'll be in touch with you to get a sense of what your community's needs are and provide any additional resources for that template itself. Let's see here.
Awesome. And just saw a good question from Tabitha from Charlotte. Is that new? Yes, that library is new, part of our whole responsiveness element here, trying to make sure we can get these resources out as fast as possible.
Yes, and a big thanks to our dev team for creating that content so quickly overall. So perfect. Last thing I just want to spend a couple of minutes doing is giving you a quick recap on the playbook itself. So what we're covering right now are just some best practices to keep in mind as you continue to use this. The first thing to remember, and this is going to be true for all engagement that you may conduct, but especially during something like a public health emergency, direct, concise, and consistent updates are really key. Across all of the different engagement channels that you're using, if you can try and use the same source of information, the same type of language, if you can make it short and bite-sized for the community to understand, if you can try and make it so that we're avoiding health lingo and we're sticking with more colloquial terms, that's going to extend the reach for the majority of the people that are out there. But just make sure that it's concise and consistent. That's going to be your best friend when it comes to helping combat some of the other misinformation that's currently out there. Definitely use your community groups. So as I mentioned, this is it's a really challenging time. I know that there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of people are scared out there, but in terms of something that we can consider a benefit in terms of what everyone is dealing with, it's the fact that everyone is dealing with this right now. So use your community groups. Typically when we talk about community groups, we think about our nonprofit groups or maybe our churches or maybe other groups that address marginalized communities. I'm talking about all of your community groups. So think, for example, in the state of North Carolina, Duke Energy, who's our major energy provider here, just sent out a lot of updates about how they're waiving all of their late fees and how they're going to stop discontinuation of service, excuse me. So that's a great thing to include in that consolidated website for your residents to know. Maybe they haven't gotten the Duke Energy notification. Maybe they're worried about their energy bill and they're considering going to work when they really shouldn't be. These are the types of things that I'm talking about when I mean use all of your community groups and make sure that you can integrate as much of that information as possible. And then finally, I think I just kind of alluded to this, but intersectionality in messaging is really key. So that means taking a look at who are all of the different stakeholders who are going to be impacted by this, and how can I make sure that I'm communicating as much of that messaging together as possible. So a simple example of this is with schools. All of us have a lot of schools in our communities that are currently shut down. Parents I know are having a hard time figuring out what to do with their kids when they're home. I know that a lot of parents, I've heard questions about parents asking, well, I know my schools are closed, but are the daycares closed? And so those types of things, if you're on the schools tab, not in addition to including all of the school closures, include, if your kid gets their school meals, your breakfast and lunch from here, give information about where to find out if they can still pick that information up. Maybe provide some information about, like we saw in that chatbot earlier, about what you can do to keep your kids entertained or what other people have done that has worked. And just think about the different community groups that may be affected and try and combine as much of that messaging as possible. I'm being verbose, so I apologize, but I hope this helps. And then the last couple of things that I really want to run through are very much just your typical engagement playbook that are just going to be really crucial to follow for COVID-19 and all of the communication for it. So typically with engagement, we have two types of engagement. We have passive engagement, which includes all of your current listservs, we'll call them. So anybody who's currently engaged with you, who knows you exist out there, who knows that they want to go to you for information. So consider that passive. That means you're just going to post on your website, your discussion boards, your existing, any online surveys that you may want to put up in your existing website, for example. And then, of course, your email newsletter listserv. Those already exist. So in addition to that, what we're doing is we also want you to look at active engagement. So active engagement is a little bit different. This is where you, once you've done your passive engagement, what you're going to do is say, okay, so who am I missing? And now I'm going to actively focus on those groups to make sure I can close the loop and actually reach all these residents as well. So it really helps you reach out to marginalized communities, and it helps you cut through a lot of the noise that may be out there when it comes to misinformation. So examples about active engagement include targeted social media outreach. This is a key tool to really get in front of people, especially if they don't know that you exist or that you're the best source of information, and they're looking on Facebook to figure out what should I be doing during COVID. I really have a sneaking suspicion that social media was the reason that a lot of people thought that coronavirus was actually caused by corona fear. So that's the type of information that we don't want to keep circulating out there. Geo-targeted outreach is really crucial as well. So if you know there are pockets of your community that are more affected than others, that are more likely to not have this information, then geo-targeted outreach is going to be crucial for you as well. That's, again, all included throughout the toolkit, but it's a really good tool to use, even if you're just using Facebook itself. And then finally, I'm just going to harp on this again, but community partners. So anytime that you can tap into your existing community's reserves of whoever they're able to communicate with and then plug yourself into that communication outreach, it's going to help everybody be closer and on the same page. And once this is all over, everyone, because we're going to get through this, it's going to be over eventually. And once our communities start bouncing back to 100%, when we're able to help our communities get to that point, all this is going to do is it's going to really set you up to have a great relationship with even more of your residents. So think of this as the long-term play as well, in terms of being able to serve the residents you're already going to be serving even better by building a long-term relationship with them. So I gave you, and the whole goal behind that, is, as I just mentioned, is really just building that future for engagement. And as you can see here with the City of Charlotte's dashboard, our goal here, in the last 7 days alone, they've already, engaged 900 folks, and this is just through their specific dashboard. I'm not sure if this includes any of the COVID-19 communication. So, over time, what happens in our system, or just over time, what happens in your community, is you continue to build these relationships, and the group of people that will turn to you when they need help or when they just need information, that will grow larger and larger and larger. And our communities will just get better at how we're able to support each other. So a little kumbaya moment there for our ending. But Jay, if you'd like, I think that's the last slide that I have. Would you like to take over and talk through some virtual engagement tools here?
That's perfect. Yeah, if Hunter can hand back presenters to me, I'll jump back in. But definitely appreciate you sharing that, Madura. It's good to reframe a lot of this work that way. And certainly, solving the meeting challenge is front of mind for all of us. And making sure we're doing that in the context of building a long-term strategy or foundation for engagement is wonderful. So
for sure.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again here. I think with that in mind, the second half of our presentation focuses more on the virtual meetings aspect of the work, and that's been a front of mind for many of you. There's kind of two key questions that have popped up. So what about our existing conference tools, and how about Facebook Live and YouTube? So we've got a number of different integrations set up with different tools like these, but I think it's first important to recognize kind of how these tools work and what are the benefits and drawbacks of each format. So the big thing is a lot of teams already have software like this, like Zoom or WebEx or other tools that can essentially facilitate an online meeting. So the benefit there is that just like today, you have multiple participants who are able to participate, and they can share their screens, they can present like this. It's ideal almost for what we're trying to do with public meetings. And of course, as professionals, we're familiar with how to use these tools. We've got the browsers and the computers to actually engage through them. However, on the other side of that fence is our job as communicators, as the public sector, in terms of how we engage the public, means opening up the doors for people to engage, lowering barriers to participation, and making it possible for the broad general public to participate in our process. If we're doing this through our professional conferencing tools, there are some serious limitations around browsers that are supported, the need to register, to sign in through a tool like this, and even sometimes download software. Those can be significant barriers to entry for folks that may not have the devices to support that. Or just may not have the familiarity, right? These aren't necessarily tools that folks use every day in their lives. So the other side is that, as you can see with our chat thread here, it can be rather unstructured and messy. So the ability to organize the feedback that's coming in through a conference chat is challenging. And of course, we've even had challenges from our conferences. Sometimes we'll go back and try to understand who was there, who attended, what did they say? Can we get a transcript of that? And sometimes that's just not something we can get our hands on. So extending that into the public record sphere creates a lot of other concerns and questions about how we can make sure we're actually complying with information laws and able to later comply with Information Act requests. So those are the drawbacks. Again, they're super close. So we'll return to conferencing tools in a moment. The other thing that is front of mind, let's see if I can advance. There we go. So Facebook Live and YouTube. These have been part of PublicInput's platform for a couple of years now in terms of the ability to bring in a Facebook Live stream or a YouTube Live video into one of your events. So through the events dashboard, you can host that kind of thing, but there are some drawbacks here. So you're using a platform that is certainly familiar to a lot of people, and if you've already got a Facebook following, there's an advantage here in that you'll automatically have a little bit of access to some residents. It's also really easy to have a ton of participation through these platforms. So there's really no caps on participants when you're using something like a YouTube Live. It looks like my drawbacks only got 2 out of the 3 here, but I'll cover those. Of course, the challenge becomes if you've got a need to broadcast a city council meeting, to host any sort of meeting where you'll have more than one person participating and they're not in the same room, the challenge emerges where these tools just kind of can't really fit the need. And once we reemerge from this, I think we'll see more utilization of Facebook Live and YouTube. Until we have the ability to have those participants all in the same room, though, it can be a challenge. Again, the records liability challenge is there in terms of capturing the comments that come across. These social platforms allow participants to delete their comments. And if you don't capture those through some other mechanism, there's this question of if those are actually kept similar to our chat thread in perpetuity as a public record. And I wish I hadn't left off my last drawback here. But generally, if you've got multiple people, it's tough to do. If you've got records issues, I'm trying to think of anything else there. If we compare it to the conference tools, the staff familiarity side of things. So the YouTube Live and Facebook Live are a bit more cantankerous to operate, but not as big of a drawback. So if we've got those kinds of benefits and drawbacks for conference tools, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, each of them presents their challenges. So our focus here, and the reason my eyes are probably a little bit sunken in, is the product team has been working long hours to figure out a solution that does all of these things. So allowing people to show up without a login or password or download, that's 101. You've got to be able to do that. having the ability to kind of mirror in-person meetings in the sense that you'll have more than one presenter, more than one speaker, and be able to do something like this, present the screen, is key. You've got to be able to do that so that way you can show what you're talking about, especially for a lot of these projects and items where there's a map involved or anything that's visual. So allowing residents to engage without necessarily having to have the best browser or the ability to download things, that's key. And the last aspect that we're layering in there is in terms of collecting contact info and questions and comments into a central database. So as long as you're capturing the comments that are coming across, either through an API or some other system like a PublicInput that we'll show here in a second, you're able to comply with records laws and have everything in one place. Those are the kind of the key things to look for in a full solution here. So with that in mind, we've got a couple examples. So as I mentioned, we do Facebook Live and YouTube Live integrations. That's been part of the toolkit. Some of our partners are already familiar with those things. If you've got just a single presenter, essentially the integration aspect of this solves for some of those drawbacks we were talking about. So you're able to push this out. In this case, this was, I believe Prince Edward Island was doing a live broadcast earlier today. I just brought this into the toolkit. But ultimately, you're wrapping your Facebook Live or your YouTube Live broadcast in your public engagement system, PublicInput in this case. And so we're synchronizing via the API to pull in those comments and make them part of your record so you can analyze all the comments in one place. We're also embedding that to where you can share this publicly. So someone doesn't necessarily have to have a Facebook account or a YouTube account to participate. This is a public forum, it's easy to access. It's in a format people are familiar with. Again, if you just have one presenter and you're not necessarily using slides like this, we think this is an ideal format. And you get the added benefits of being part of a social network with that. So that integrated approach is one that we're excited about. The one that's newest is working to bring in Zoom. So we've been talking about Facebook Live and YouTube Live till we were blue in the face, and we realized that we weren't solving the problem completely. So our focus turned to figuring out how to bring in web conferences. And so in this case, we've added the functionality to bring in a Zoom conference. So on the back end, this is only enabled for a handful of customers right now, and we're going to roll this out to all customers on Monday. You can add a Zoom conference to any meeting by opening up the meeting editor and pasting in your shareable Zoom conference link. What that does on the back end, we'll go and parse the meeting ID and associate that meeting to your PublicInput meeting, where it can be shared out on a public link. So if you're following along online, the link for creating a new dashboard actually embeds this video, the meeting today. Let's see if I can get to the chat window. Or Hunter, if you can post the publicinput.com/create dashboard. Make sure you don't have your speakers on too loud, because I think you might have two conferences going at the same time if you open up this window. But let's see if I can share it on my screen. Once you have set this up, your public meeting can then embed the Zoom meeting that you're setting up. So you get the benefits of having essentially the Zoom functionality of having multiple presenters, being able to share your screen, but you're also able to share this publicly for folks to participate and see without necessarily having to download a conferencing service or having to log in or register. There's also the benefit of when they participate as part of this, their comments are being stored in your records database. Let's see if I can share my screen with this on it. I can move things around here. So this is a little weird because I'm looking at myself, but generally the webinar itself is being embedded into your PublicInput page. Looks like I need to enable comments on this. I can go turn those on in a moment. But ultimately, you're wrapping your engagement experience around your live broadcast of that meeting. So if someone doesn't have the time to show up for the live webinar, they can still participate, they can still leave a comment. And as the meeting's unfolding, they can, of course, comment and ask questions to the presenter. Let's see if I can go turn those questions on. Let's do this on the screen here. I just turn this to always. I'll have to refresh our meeting here. Thankfully, it hasn't echoed too much for me. Okay, yeah, so now our comment section is opened up here. Again, you can wrap this around any other set of questions, interactive maps. The same things that you're able to do with PublicInput.com platform on a regular basis are now essentially integrated alongside your virtual meetings. And now we're getting a nice meeting inside of a meeting effect here. We'll see how far that one can go. Anyhow, so hopefully that illustrates a little bit of the idea here. I'll jump back into the presentation. But again, if you have questions while we're sharing this, please drop them into the chat here, and we'll address those as part of our Q&A. So once we've set this up, the integration certainly has more ways to go. This is brand new for us, and we're still figuring out what all the implications might be. But we'll continue to work on this, and ultimately we see the future iterations of this being able to bring chat messages into your record from Zoom. For now, we recommend that you use the PublicInput Q&A and chat box for the public comment aspects of this. We'll also be able to integrate more deeply with Zoom. There's a few layers of that we still got to unpack, and we're moving as fast as we can. But in the short term, we believe this presents a great solution for holding public meetings and solving the engagement challenge around that. So another layer of this that is important to mention is it's not just about hosting the meeting itself. Now that you're using a different format for meetings, getting the word out becomes even more critical. So a big part of what we focus on here is using social media outreach. And I can probably, Madura, if you want to talk through this, I know your team does a lot of this work, and it makes sense to cover some of this.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much, Jay. And that was fantastic. The Zoom integration is really exciting. That was the first time I got to see it too, so I'm just worried.
Yeah, for the most part, our team hasn't seen this yet either.
Quick movement.
We're going to be, we'll be training our team and our consultant partners in the coming days and rolling that out as fast as we can. So.
Yeah, no, that was great. And we're talking through some targeted outreach here. So I know that we have mentioned a couple times now that, geo-targeted outreach and as a way to help reach your residents. Let me go back to the slide deck so I can make sure that everyone's caught up here. In terms of getting the actual word out, so this is, we're back to active engagement here. In addition, you can always, of course, post to your own Facebook following. So that's always an important thing to do. Same thing with Nextdoor or Twitter or Instagram or any of the other social media followings that you have. But once you've kind of exhausted that avenue, where do you go next to then reach new people on social media or people that have not yet interacted with you on your social media pages to make sure that they understand, hey, you're out there and you're a great resource for information. So the way that this works is it's pretty simple. Let's see if I can move a little video bubble here. All right. It's pretty simple. So in the back end of the system, what we have an integration with Facebook that allows you, if for some reason, if you do not have a Facebook Live, for example, and let me back up here. If you do not have business ads for Facebook, so you don't have the ability to boost your content on Facebook and actively target populations, this is a really great way to be able to have a backup for that functionality. So in our system, it's really very simple. You kind of, let's say you are wanting to get the health pledge out in front of some community members that you know would find it beneficial, or even particular community groups that would find it beneficial. This is also a great thing to do if you know that you have, viral spread in a particular area of your community. This may be the right thing to be able to send folks in the area that's most affected. So let's say you want to do that. And all you have to do is just fill out some basic information in the back end of our system. Make sure that you connect it with the existing project at hand. So in this case, it would be the public health pledge. And if you want to be able to bring in comments from that, oftentimes what we find, and what I mean by this, oftentimes what we find is that when people see a post on Facebook, if they're interested in the content, they may not necessarily want to click on a link to then maybe give you more information or look more, but they may be intrigued enough to give you some type of feedback by leaving a comment as a post. So even if you're just asking a question in terms of, related to COVID-19, what resources do you need from your local government to make this easier on you? Even if that's the type of question that you want to ask on social media, it's really great to give something to have it so that people can react to it rather than just sending out information that they're then required to take a step to learn more about. The main point that I'm coming to here is that we can bring in those comments and you'll have yet another avenue to bring in, lowering that barrier to participation or engagement with additional residents and be able to follow up with those folks at a later date. So make sure that you're always thinking those for any of our current clients that are on this call. And then what this allows you to do is essentially say, all right, great. So I know my area, this is Jay's hometown here, and I know that there are a couple of areas, these 2 areas for sure, and then this little area down here as well, that I know I want to really target and get in front of. Once you've set this up and created your own Facebook post itself, like you're seeing here, it's just telling you what the public health pledge says. All you have to do is send confirm. Our team will take care of making it go through Facebook itself, and then everyone that's in this community that fits any of the targeting criteria that you've set up here will receive that information. So this is excellent if you're trying to just get in front of people that you have not yet been in front of, especially if you're talking about marginalized communities. So Facebook is a unique tool. I'm not personally on Facebook, but for a lot of folks, it is kind of the way that they get information. And because of that, they put a lot of themselves out on Facebook. So the good news about that is you can use some of the information that is publicly available, they have decided to make publicly available, to then reach those specific populations. This can include anything from race to age to language to specific location in terms of where they're actually located, if they put that up on there. I think Facebook in the past, and they may have discontinued this, but they also used to do income level, right? So we know that the most affected in our communities oftentimes are those that they're going to be disproportionately affected, I should say, are in the lowest socioeconomic brackets. You can use Facebook to help close the gap with those residents as well. So just some ways to get you thinking about how to target, actively seek out those populations that you most need to get in front of that may be hurting the most in this type of a situation. Let me jump back into the other thing that you can do to help engage marginalized communities is text messaging. And we found that this is actually a really excellent way, low barrier to entry, to either give people something to react to, as in, like the question that I asked, do you have enough, if you're talking to healthcare workers in a particular area, do you have enough hospital supplies? Or for the average resident, something simpler, right? In terms of, do you want to get updates, or can we send you updates on COVID-19, or do you feel comfortable? Do you feel like you're prepared about this situation? None of the ones that I just gave you are the best example, but hopefully it gets your brain thinking in terms of what types of questions you can ask them. And the reason that we say that texting is really excellent, is because everyone knows how to text, right? You don't have to have a smartphone. You don't even have to be in an area that gets a lot of internet access, right? So especially for rural communities or communities that have low access to broadband, text messaging is a phenomenal way to be able to get in front of them and just to be able to ask them to opt in and reach out to you for additional information. Jay actually, it looks like set up a really interesting little activity for us to be able to do here. Jay, would you like to lead us through this so that we can, our attendees here can experience this?
Sure. I'll see if I can call this without kicking me off the phone line. But
sure.
One of the other big things that emerged, so our partners at the City of Raleigh pointed out that one of the big needs right now is, like, during the meeting, being able to capture comments from folks that might be listening in, but not necessarily be comfortable with using an online form or even with texting. So providing another way for residents to call in and leave a comment. So there's a couple of aspects of what we're building out here. So this is a big kudos to Ruben Morales on our team. He's put in probably 12-hour days for the last 4 days straight, just building out new integrations that support the kind of outreach we need to be doing right now. So in this case, providing a way for people to call in and leave a question or a comment during a meeting, or just generally for open comment, is now supported on projects. We'll be rolling out the interface for that early next week. But he's built out a test case for us here, and you can actually enter any project ID when you're calling in. But let's see if I can dial this. If I get kicked off, please let me back in. But the beauty of this is that we can also transcribe that and include it with your public record. So as part of this project, it's going to be included.
And Jay, while you're doing that, we have a couple of questions that are coming in, so I'm just going to.
Your code.
Oh, actually, never mind. There it is.
There we go. It'll repeat the prompt.
Okay.
Welcome. Please enter your code.
But it's still computer right now. We'll work on ways to
Thank you for calling PublicInput.com. The project name is Creating Your Virtual Engagement Dashboard. Before we begin, we would like to let you know that your response will be recorded to collect information related to this project. Your response will only be used for this purpose. After the beep, please leave your comment. Once you are done, just hang up.
So definitely a cheesy voice, and we'll work on providing ways to add a custom recording to that. In the meantime, though, that's a quick way to get another endpoint set up, and we're really excited about being able to transcribe that and bring it back into your comments. So again, this I think is just a point to make around like how we operate here. We're leaning in, listening to what you need, and iterating with that in mind. So we're really looking forward to continuing to do this sort of work and seeing where this goes. It's certainly a challenging time for all of us, and our mechanism for dealing with that is to lean in and build as much as we can to help you solve this challenge. But Madhura, if we want to cover other items in terms of how to get started and potential ways to apply this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Actually, Jay, it looks like there are a couple of options. There are a couple of questions coming in about the Colin option. Do you think we should address those first, or would it be better for us to go through those at the end of the webinar? Right? We're close to the end here.
Sure. Well, we can leave this up. I guess in terms of the Colin options.
Yeah, I can read some out
for you.
Read the chat. No worries. Yeah. So we've got Sarah Parkins asking for the Colin option. Can the project team record a message to use instead of having a computer voice? And that sounds like it may be an iteration. The way you're smiling here, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. As soon as we get like about 6 hours of sleep, we'll keep plugging. But absolutely, that's the goal is. Do that and keep things on track in terms of iterating on the text and, of course, the Zoom integration that we covered earlier.
Great.
But absolutely.
No, that's great. Thanks. And then Anthony Hill asked for the call-in option, what's the mechanism to re-engage with a person without a callback number specifically? Are we kind of getting those yeah, what does that look like?
That's a good point. So the current process, we're going to capture the number they called from. That is something we'll have to keep in mind, though. So providing that option. The other thing that's on the radar for immediate next steps on that functionality is the multilingual element. So providing different language versions of that intro that you can press a number to change. So again, this is one of those things where Ruben finished with the MPP this morning, and we'll be working on it this weekend just to make sure that it can do everything it needs to do.
No, that's fine. I think future iterations are totally great for us to just lay out in terms of what is coming down the line. No need to have Ruben not sleep. That's okay. And then
yeah, those are great questions.
Yeah, great question, I think. Thank you. And then Serena's asking for the call-in option. Generally, what is turnaround time like this for the host to actually receive the transcribed comments? So if I were to call in and leave a message, what would it look like for you as the host to then be able to see that comment?
Correct. So right now, the way that's working is we're actually receiving back from Twilio, the vendor we're using for this. As soon as you're done recording, they process it. So that's, I'd say between 10, 15 seconds, we'll get a link to the audio and a transcript of that text. So at that point, we'll insert it into the records database. So if you're looking at the comments analysis part of the application, just clicking the refresh comments button will bring in those comments as they're arriving. So that's a good point, though. For meetings, we'll probably look into ways for folks that are actually leading the meeting to maybe get a text notification. There's a couple other potential pathways there to serve that up. Ideally, if we can figure out more of the Zoom integration factor, we can push those via Zoom's API into the chat window. Again, this is me as a product guy.
All the different solution. Yeah, no worries. No, that's great. Thanks so much. We'll hold off on the rest of the questions until until we get through the next couple of slides. We're really close, everyone. We really appreciate. I think keep them coming for sure. They're really great. The comments and the questions, and we appreciate them. In terms of how to access this information, so we've got a couple of different options here for you. As I mentioned, if you're a current client already, you have access to all of this data available to you. So if we're going back to the city of Charlotte, for example, as a way to walk through this, the templates library here has all of that communication piece, the COVID communication piece available to you. You're welcome to use that at any time. For the events management piece, the look of this is a little different for those of you that are jumping into this right now. So the events and meetings, what you can basically do is anytime you create a new item, so a new event, the Zoom integration piece in here, you know what, it's probably not in the view yet. Hang on, let me just jump in here.
We'll have to turn on Zoom for Charlotte here in a second.
We'll have to turn on. I'm so sorry. Of course, I'm looking for a button that doesn't exist there yet right now. I apologize, everyone. It's going to be in the actual event setting whenever you're creating a new item, if it's turned on for you. So that's really all it comes down to. But once you click that button and you integrate in, just you type in your URL, just like it is for Facebook or YouTube Live, That's all you're going to need as long as you're logged in as a host for the Zoom meeting itself.
And part of the reason there is we're actively today, we're creating some of the help documents to make sure you've got what you need to do. There's a few things in Zoom that you need to set up in a particular way that we're documenting. We hope to have that documentation done today and then again roll out as early as Monday. So
no
just some context there.
Helpful. So for current clients, you have you can basically just take a look at the links that are on your computer and go to those. For current consultants, all you have to do is go to publicinput.com/partners, and you'll get all the information that you need. And for new clients, you're welcome to go to publicinput.com/create-dashboard. It's also in the chat feature, in the chat bot that is currently circulating. So feel free to use those as a way to figure out what you need to do to access this information. And then in terms of, Jay, did you want to talk through certified partner implementation?
Sure, I can cover that briefly. So the Certified Partners Program is led up by Graham and Michael and our team. Essentially, we're working very closely with consultants that are looking to differentiate with software and to improve the state of public involvement for their partners. And we also want to recognize that not everybody is looking to take on implementation for a lot of this stuff by themselves. So we certainly will share best practices and have a library to share what other clients are doing. And we're always, of course, available via the chat window. In the case of a lot of these projects, though, working with a certified partner is a preferred route. So if you're a consultant on the call today and you're looking for ways to use this with your clients, if you go to publicinput.com/partners, there's more information there on how to get started. And we'll get you rolling as fast as we can here.
Thanks, Jay. That's great.
Yeah.
And then I think we're officially at the Q&A session. Let's see.
I'll grab some water, but Hunter, if you've got some questions that are coming in, and we can dive in on that here next.
I'm trying to pull up the chat.
Okay. Yeah, so Colin, text functionalities.
There we go. You know what? I think I can pull it up myself here.
Yeah. Hey, Jay, if you look in your private channel here on Zoom and just scroll up, they should be in order that way.
That's great. So yeah, aside from public comments, government organizations often have a requirement for residents to be heard. Is there a video audio solution for that? And yes, with the call-in line, that's certainly one. You can optionally extend those Zoom registration links to folks that are interested. So as you saw on our example Zoom integration page, you can also register for the webinar here. That's an option. I think it just depends on the nature of the venue if you want to open that up for extending the presenter or audio role to other participants. Again, there's a little bit of a barrier there in terms of folks that are able to join, and that might be helped by the call-in line. Yes, so the Wi-Fi question. So how will they be able to access meetings? So currently the best option we have there is the call-in line to leave a comment. Again, the Zoom meeting itself, the other pathway there would be to make the call-in number for that meeting available. They, of course, would be able to comment through that, and then you want to encourage folks to use either the online form or the call-in number to make a comment. But if they don't have Wi-Fi, that's the best pathway right now. Of course, without Wi-Fi, the presentation aspects of this are not available to them, but you're covering a lot of different ways for people to engage at that point. The other thing that might be helpful there to consider is placing some of this into text-based format. So most of our surveys, if you convert them over to a text message survey, it's automatically going to take your question content and reformat it for text engagement. That's another option there. Granted, there are always some things that you can't text, like drop a pin on a map. But yeah. Scroll through some questions here. Can the text function support translation into other languages? Madhura, do you want to cover that? I know you've done several projects along those lines.
Yeah, the short answer to that, thanks Jay, is yes. So we actually, within the system, we have something called last mile translation that typically applies really easily to surveys themselves. So if you have quite a few different communities that, speak different languages as their primary language, and you want to be able to put up the same survey but with different components or in different languages and still have the results all talk to one another, we have something in our system called last mile translation that addresses that. With texting, you can do the same thing, which is really exciting. And that is a new feature that's been built out in the last 6 months itself. So what essentially happens is when someone texts in for a survey, it might be something as simple as, text transit to the code that you provide, or text COVID-19 to the code that you provide. And the way that our system works is it'll automatically create kind of a chat bot that sends one message, you respond to it, it sends another message, you respond to it. And the language translation capability, what it basically does is it translates it using Google Translate first. Then what you have the option to do is you have the option to actually update that machine translated content so that it reads 100% accurate. Because I think we've all experienced Google Translate. It's a wonderful tool, but it really doesn't really work for idioms or colloquialisms or really just syntax sometimes. So this is a way for you to save a lot of time and still overwrite the machine translated content. Jake, send it back to you, or
Sure.
yeah.
Sure.
I'm just not sure where you are in the chat.
Sorry,
where you're reading the messages. Yeah.
I was going to pull up the dashboard there, but that's me being a product person. Okay, so for the responding to emails, okay. Is it possible to organize when people leave comments, or what to call in live with a comment? If people can leave comments about any item, any topic that's not on the agenda, how would you organize and navigate those comments? That's a great question. Yeah, so the way to structure those, as with any engagement, is looking at the way you're asking the question. So rather than just opening up the comment box around meetings, you can structure those questions. Let's see if I can, I can share my screen, Madera.
Oh, yeah. Excuse me here. Let me stop this. There you go. It's all you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see. So I was playing with an example here. So I can pull that up for us. This is a budget survey. Share. There's a couple elements here. So I think the first part of this question is like, so if things are unstructured, how can we manage them? If we want to approach this through a comment tool, there are qualitative analysis elements. Again, well, I don't have any comments on this test project, but ultimately our system has a number of different tools in place to help you analyze comments. We take a first pass with a language parsing tool. It then kind of parses out the different themes that are emerging, and you can use that to start from a comment coding or tagging perspective. So that helps you move from unstructured to adding a bit more structure. But the best place to start, if you do want better structured input, is asking the right kind of questions. So in this case, these are a pretty lengthy survey, but the first few handful of comment questions are going to be very specific. And we've noticed that on very contentious issues as well, it's important to structure those questions around things that are going to be productive for you as a organization. So instead of asking, like, do you have general comments about the project? If we know that it's a contentious project, ask for more specific things about what's important to you in the outcomes this project creates, or what are your primary objectives that you believe are important for us to address when building this. So these are these budget kind of example questions, but similar things. So you can essentially wrap the questions alongside the meeting and then disable the general meeting comments if you'd like to avoid kind of the open-ended comment box there. Hopefully that's good context for that question.
That's great. Thanks, Jay. And then we've got just a couple more, we have quite a few more questions. So I'll just say this, given that we're coming up on time here, if we don't address your question right now, we promise we will follow up with you via email and kind of let you know what's going on and answer your question. We absolutely will. That being said, the couple of questions that are coming in here, let's see. Is there a specific type of Zoom license needed to use the integration tool, and is there a cost for the services? So Jay, would you like to talk through the Zoom license needed for the integration tool? I know you said that there was kind of a specific workflow that needed to happen there. We'll have some documentation for this next week, but in the meantime, go ahead.
Yeah, the short answer to that is yes, you definitely, the way it is currently set up, we do lean on the organization's Zoom license to do this. So you'll be creating a Zoom meeting and then pulling the link from Zoom and putting it into PublicInput to integrate that into your engagement hub. So the licenses, it's mostly based around a number of participants. So if you're using a webinar approach, there's the option to have, I think, upwards of 500 participants. There are a couple workarounds that we found via API that can help with if you know that you're going to have a ton of people and you don't want to necessarily have seats for each of those persons or for each of those participants. There's a couple workarounds that are a little more involved that we'll document. But for now, the simple approach, Zoom does treat online participants that come through public input as a participant in the meeting. They're still serving up that data, so that will need to be included in how we plan those licenses. Again, we'll be sure to cover all of this as part of onboarding and the docs as well. I saw another question around the, in terms of getting started, again, if you're a current client, these things are already built in. You've got access to this, and the Zoom element will start to go live again Monday. In terms of folks that haven't worked with us before, what we're doing, just during all this, is we're kind of moving away from our traditional enterprise or annual contract model to be able to deploy this at P-card levels. And that just helps us keep staffing and applying people to make sure you're covered. But that departmental license that we've set up starts at $7.99 a month, or it is $7.99 a month. It's no more than that. But that includes 5 administrator seats to help you get started and at least start moving with putting meetings online and managing the comments that you're receiving there. And again, that's set up under Create Dashboard. So if you go to the site and drop in your contact information, we'll go ahead and start building the dashboard for you and be in touch to set that up. So expect within a couple hours of that to receive substantial times to do an onboarding session, and we'll go ahead and send you access to the back end. That way you'll have your admin dashboard. So
perfect.
Hopefully that answers those questions.
Oops, sorry about that, Jay. Didn't mean to cut you off, but just last thing, we will absolutely be sending out a recorded version of this webinar as well as the slide deck. You may expect that it may take a little while for our video to upload onto YouTube so we can send it out to you, but we'll get it to you by Monday at the latest. And then the last thing, just before we sign off, Jay, please feel free to jump in here as well. I just want to say, thanks so much for all of the hard work that all of you have been doing. We know that this has been an incredibly stressful, uncertain, and challenging time, but I think over and over and over and over again in all of the conversations that I know I have with our clients, I'm nothing but impressed and appreciative of all the work that all of you are putting in, because it seems like the reaction that most of the people that at least I'm talking to are having is, let's just step up and do more. So I know your residents appreciate it. I know I appreciate it as a resident of a city that's doing a great job, and just keep your head up and we'll get through this well. So thank you again for your time. And Jay, I'll turn it over to you.
That's perfect. Thank you all for being here today. We're right at the end of our hour, so good timing, and keep doing the great work. Appreciate y'all.
Appreciate y'all.